It's a 20-yard punt. It's basically when we're warming up, it's just...
We're back.
See that?
With Marc Nolan, a voter doubtful of Georgia's 2020 election results.
I am skeptical.
So far, he's learned thousands of Muskogee County voters Republicans claimed were ineligible to vote because they allegedly lived out of state did live in the county, and why one of Georgia's most experienced election directors trusts the 2020 results.
I'm confident of our results, and I'm confident of the statewide results.
Up next, Marc heads here to the Georgia State Capitol. On deck, Secretary Brad Raffensperger, head of the state's elections. But first, Marc sits down with the Secretary's Chief Operating Officer, Gabriel Sterling. His previous role included implementing Georgia's Dominion voting machines, a job he admits he did not want. But the Secretary says he couldn't find anyone else to do it at the time. He also passionately defended the 2020 election results and poll workers threatened by Trump supporters.
It has all gone too far.
A state employee Marc criticized multiple times on Twitter, calling him a fraud and demanding he resign.
He's got no background in project management. He's got no background in software. He's got no background in hardware. But how did he get that job? So I asked him 4 or 5 times. He wouldn't respond to me, right? And I threw something out there on Twitter, and it was right after that is pretty much when I got banned.
Nearly a year later, he's meeting the man he attacked online in person.
How you doing, sir?
Mr. Sterling?
Gabe Sterling.
Marc Nolan, nice to
Nice to
meet
see
you.
you.
How are you?
Once settled in, most of Marc's questions do not focus on the 2020 election results or Gabriel's background. Instead, he spends his time asking about the state's previous voting systems, his displeasure with Georgia's voting machines, and its $107 million cost.
Do you really think that's good for the state of Georgia from the taxpayer standpoint?
No, we consider this contract to be very good for the taxpayers.
One of Marc's questions that did focus on 2020 centered on this letter by Governor Brian Kemp requesting the state's election board investigate claims that a private auditor identified 36 inconsistencies in Fulton County during the election.
Have you seen that report? Have you seen that document?
The Secretary's office says it investigated and found no fraud.
It's sloppiness, irresponsibility. It's not Ocean's 11. They can't be irresponsible and not do a great job and then pull off the biggest heist in history. It's one or the other.
Next, Marc expresses security concerns with ballot drop boxes. The 2020 election was the first time they were ever used in Georgia.
I mean, we trust the Postal Service, right? So why did it have to happen now?
Frankly, we had COVID, and there was a lot of fear around the postal system, quite frankly. And it was driven by politics and some reality. And here's the thing. Drop boxes are much better monitored than a USPS post office box. If somebody's ballot harvesting, they can just go drop it in there. There's no cameras or anything. So we had cameras. We required the cameras.
Marc's time with Gabriel comes to an end.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And it's now time to interview his boss, Secretary Brad Raffensperger.
Morning, sir. How are you, sir?
Brad Raffensperger.
Brad, Marc Nolan. Nice to meet
Marc.
you.
Over the past year, the Secretary has repeatedly defended the 2020 election results.
I know there are people that are convinced the election was fraught with problems.
Most of that criticism coming from his own party, including former President Trump, who told him this over the phone after the election.
The people of Georgia are angry.
Marc asked the Secretary about allegations of fraud and the outcome of the investigations.
So all those people that you have said we're going to go after from election fraud, I mean, they had to be adjudicated.
We still have open cases for 2020. And so our investigators are looking at that, and then as additional information it becomes available, then we open up an investigation. But we already brought many cases before the state election board, and they're working on closing up all those.
To close it out, do you believe that you have an honest and fair election that came out of the 2020?
I said there's never a perfect election.
Never a perfect election.
But every allegation that was made, we open up an investigation. People alleged 10,315 dead people. We found 4. My letter said 2, we found 2 more. But that we run it down. And the reason that President Trump came up short, I think probably number 1 is that 28,000 people skipped the presidential ballot, and yet they voted down ballot. And I think that's the story of what happened in Georgia.
And I appreciate your time. You're an extremely busy man, so thank you very much for...
My pleasure.
Mark, what did you think?
I think they gave me some great answers about how they believed that not just the Dominion system, but how all the counties performed and how they as an organization performed their duties. I think they were all spot on.
On social media, you called Gabriel Sterling a fraud. Do you
Yeah.
still believe that?
I wouldn't use fraud. He did not belong in that role as a project manager, implementation manager. He was in a role, Andy, that he had no prior experience in or knowledge in.
Coming up, Mark meets the state's expert who oversees Georgia's voting machines.
So how would you explain all the irregularities that have been identified, such as?